Good afternoon. I'm calling this meeting of the Audit Committee to order. First item on the agenda is the quorum call. I believe we've got our members present. Regent Hall Crew. Here. Madam Chair.
Here.
And I'm Rudy Garza. Thank you all for being here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to have a moment of silence. Okay, thank you. Now we're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Carl, if we get you to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, if you would please read the Del Mar College vision statement with me. Del Mar College will be the premier choice for life-changing educational opportunities provided by responsive, innovative faculty and staff who empower students to improve local and global communities. Del Mar College is streaming live video and audio from the official Board of Regents meetings on the college's website in real time, with the exception of portions of the meeting considered as closed session by statute. Do we have any general public comments? Is there anybody from the public who wants to speak, please? All right, thank you. Okay, so we don't have any of those rules. We're going to have an organizational discussion and possible action. We can do all this in open session, correct? We don't have anything scheduled for closed session? No, right? Okay,
Anything for closed session, Augie?
No, sir.
perfect. Thank you, Augie. Okay, the review of the community charter, including statement of purpose and specific goals.
Is this just here for a placeholder in case we need to review it?
Okay, I think we did a review.
You did.
Pretty expensive review last year.
Mr. Gatsa, but you have a new committee member, and you're basically reforming the committee, and so
Okay.
it's an opportunity to revisit and review your charter,
Okay,
and you know what your plan is. If it's the same, if you want to keep moving ahead with what you already have established, that's fine too. But
well, my preference is that we move ahead with what we've established, but it would be a good idea that we just kind of, Carol, you might want to help fill me in.
Okay.
We established an internal committee for audit purposes. We talked about some of the things that we wanted to make sure that we covered in order to be able to keep ourselves, the Board of Regents, our president, and Del Mar College out of trouble. We have an excellent group that we've been working with, Weaver and Associates, that have been taking care of our internal audit plans. We came up with an audit plan for fiscal year 2023, and we asked for updates on that particular audit plan on a periodic basis so that we can then have them come back to the Board of Regents and review that plan. If there's some adjustments we'd like for them to make, then we try to see if we can make those recommendations as a committee. Did I cover that okay, Carol, or is there
Yes.
something else that you need
Yeah.
to add? Huh? Do you have any, I guess, questions about?
I've been involved in audits before, not
Okay.
on this side of the board, but on the other side, so I'm kind of familiar with what the process is.
Well, thank you, and thank you for agreeing to serve, Carl.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. I've been involved in audits too, but this is the first time that I've been on the audit committee and the city council. I didn't serve in the audit committee. I served on the municipal court committee, and Carol was kind enough to appoint me to the audit committee, and I've learned quite a bit, and I've enjoyed here recently when I've had to step in and serve as chair, and then step down when Ed handled the chair duties, and then stepping back on again. appreciate that opportunity. Again, let's just see if we can move forward, see what else we have to do. I kind of talked about the objectives, the responsibilities, and the work task. The 2 items above it were included. I think, do we need to come up with a calendar, or do we have a calendar in our bylaws? I don't recall. Is there some help I can get from you, Tammy, on that?
We set the calendar based on when the work is near completion so that we can bring it to the committee. But typically, it's like 4 times a year, we have Weaver come and they will present the audit committee with an update that the audit committee reviews and then makes recommendations to the full board. So it will be about 4 times a year. I know we had kind of paused that schedule a little bit because of certain circumstances last year, but we're picking back up with that schedule. So
Okay.
we'll send out anticipated dates. I'll send it through Dr. Escamilla and Augie and Delia on anticipated dates for the next fiscal year for possible meetings.
Okay, now is there any other, I see on item 2, we've got a discussion, possible action related to the college's internal audit committee. Will there be an additional presentation that we need to?
Yes, our Weaver
we wanna-
representatives are here. Dan
Okay.
Graves and Brandon Tanos, they're here, and they will walk you through item 2.
Okay. I guess, based on the things we talk about today, then we should accept a recommended meeting schedule for the rest of the year? Is that correct? Or is that something you'd like for us to come up with, or me to come up with?
I will work with Weaver on our anticipated dates of when the work product will be at a point to where they can bring it to the committee. And then I guess if you want to just agree that I will come up with a potential schedule and I'll work through my chain of command to provide that to you, a suggested schedule.
Okay,
Okay?
perfect. Thank you, Tammy. Are there any questions by the committee for staff, for Tammy? All right, then item 2, we'll have the discussion and possible action regarding the college's internal audit activity, including payroll, the review status of the following: internal audit, bursars, office processes, internal audit advisory of safety and security, internal audit follow-up of IT security, internal audit follow-up of purchasing, and internal audit follow-up of construction activity. Okay, thank you.
Got a button right there. There you go.
There we go. Yep. Okay. They all operate the same. You just punch the button on them everywhere you go. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
For our newest regent that I haven't met, Mr. Kroll, it's nice to meet you. I am Dan Graves. I am a partner with Weaver, who is the college's internal auditor. With me, I have Brandon Tanis. Brandon is one of our other partners who has worked on Del Mar now for a number of years with me. We have been the outsourced internal audit firm now since 2015, 2016, somewhere in there. And so we have quite a history with the college, and as part of, as you just discussed, we are providing the audit committee a status report for our internal audit plan for the fiscal year 2023. In that, we do have one report to present to you today, the payroll audit report. Brandon ran and oversaw that audit from a partner perspective, so Brandon will present to you that, and then I will present to you the rest of the status for the remainder of the plan for this year. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Brandon.
Thank you, Dan. Good afternoon, Regents. It's a pleasure to discuss the results of that audit. And so we did an internal audit over payroll. And just to give you a little history, back in about 2018, we did perform a full scope internal audit over HR. And so at that time, and part of our audit plan, we separated HR and payroll. And so we did a full scale review of HR back in about 2018, working with Mr. Henry in HR, and of course Tammy and the rest of her team. And so in this audit, we came and did payroll, and it's actually the first time we've done payroll. And so we did a deep dive and went very well, very smooth. We have great results, as you can see in the report. I'm going to talk through the details here or there. So we did a full scope audit of looking really at the processes, policies, and procedures that are performed for the college's really centralized payroll. That included not just the centralized processes performed within payroll department, but also the decentralized nature that payroll happens with reviewing and approving timesheets and monitoring leave and things like that, but also everything from timesheet entry all the way to making sure our taxes, payroll taxes are paid and so forth. So we had our coverage period. So when we say our scope and how far we look back, we started in August 1st of 21 through February 28th of 23 this year. We commenced field work in April in 24th, and we wrapped that up here in June 7th of 23. The report received a strong rating, and so we have 3 different ratings in our audit. Strong is the highest. When you look at our rating scale at the back of our report, you can see what that means. It shows very few findings and usually more moderate or low risk. There's a well-controlled design, and operations are efficient and effective. And so this is a highly rated area, and I'll talk more about that here in the next few slides on what we found through working with the different management and group within the payroll department. So again, the audit included, when we talk about the cycle, the start to finish of payroll, that included payroll records and maintenance, timekeeping and approval, payroll processing, payroll recording and distributions, and payroll reconciliations. Now, a lot of what payroll also processes, and we talk about maintenance and records, comes from the coordination with HR, which, again, we've previously evaluated. So we had that insight and understanding of how those initial processes of setting up an employee, any changes that needs to happen in pay or title, anything that could impact compensation, benefits, and so forth in the HR. We understood that, did a refresh of understanding for many changes that may have occurred from the first time we looked at HR, taking that into consideration for payroll. Again, this is the start to finish of the payroll process that we evaluated. And so as you can see, we've identified that this was a strong area. We had one finding across the 2 objectives. And so we had 2 primary objectives. Our first objective we call Objective A is our internal audit design evaluation. That includes looking at policies and procedures, the internal control structure, segregation of duties, really the efficiency and effectiveness of the processes that are performed. Overall, it is very strong. We had one minor finding, and we will talk about that in the next slide of what that is. But again, we found that you had a very well-designed and controlled payroll process. We've evaluated payroll in, I would say, other colleges, and you may have one person that has done that for many years. It's kind of all has maybe a single point of failure. That's not the case here at Del Mar. You have a group of folks. There's 3 primarily that share the responsibilities. You have a supervisor and then 2 kind of payroll techs, analysts that work on that. They review each other's work. They have good review and approval processes to ensure consistency, accuracy, and compliance of payroll. And so you have a very strong function that ensures probably the one area that if you have any complaints from your employees is going to be about is to make sure that they get paid correctly and they get paid timely. And the processes that are performed are to ensure that that is done consistent. With our discussions with the director of HR, of course, when we did the HR audit, there were some items that we identified that they worked on and implemented that kind of had a cascading effect into payroll that helped ensure that they had this environment of proper review and approval, segregation of duties, that the right access, the right people doing the activities, and so forth. So it was very strong, and I want to just reiterate that because that's not always common in what we see in a lot of colleges, and I think it's commendable here at Del Mar to see the type of structure that's there. Again, I've seen a lot of places where not relying on, good guidance or good technology, and we know you're in the middle of an ERP, and there's some things that are going to be worked on there and some wish list items that are going to be worked on in a payroll perspective, but how even the manual nature that is occurring right now is very effective and controlled. The next objective is where we do test of effectiveness. So if you tell us a process is supposed to perform as XYZ, we select samples and we evaluate that to ensure that does have consistent and accurate information. We looked at payrolls and payroll cycles. We looked at benefits, stipends, and things like that to make sure that they were paid appropriately, they were paid timely, and we had no findings. And so it was great to see that all of this, of the sample that we took, that there was consistency and accuracy and timeliness of all those payrolls. And so it's very good to see that, and I think that is commended by the internal design evaluation and the control structure that's built into those processes. And so we had one finding, and in this finding, again, I want to reiterate that there is payroll policies that are both approved by this Regent body that are approved and in place. One thing that we looked at was this, also the standard operating procedure. So this is kind of your desk manuals, your manuals to any employee can pick it up and understand what the process is supposed to be, you know, from A to Z. And those are in place in many aspects in the payroll process. There's including checklists and items like that. Well, we had one finding, and we have this as a low risk because there are other compensating controls, checklists, and things that are occurring to ensure the consistency and accuracy of payroll. But there were some areas that are processes that are being performed on a consistent basis that just weren't all documented within the SOP manuals. And so we had a recommendation just to make sure that we covered all those aspects into one set. You're not relying on one individual, so the risk is lower because you do have multiple people operating payroll, understand payroll, and so if one person was out, it can still function and it's to the right process. And so we had one finding that management has already taken on themselves to incorporate, and so they have already been working on including in their SOP manual all those missing elements that we identified and provided separately. So these are already in progress and probably already in draft form being reviewed internally. And so I'll just kind of give kudos again to HR Payroll for the work that they're doing in the structure and in the competencies that we saw there. That was the result of our payroll audit. I'll open up to any questions.
So basically, this finding is that there were processes and procedures that were being done but weren't documented in a SOP.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So again, more of a low-risk item because, again, there's also checklists that are used in payroll cycles. So when we're running it, we're making sure that we're following those steps and processes. But, you know, we also look at succession planning and continuity of operations. So let's say you bring on a new person or all your payroll people won the lottery tomorrow and decide not to come in. You know, could we bring somebody in to understand all the processes? And so it's good to have a complete SOP manual with all those processes. So again, more of a documentation exercise, not so much that there was a real control gap or things that were not occurring in that process.
That's good.
Okay. I'll turn it back over to Dan for the rest of our presentation.
Yeah, so we're very pleased to be able to present that, a strong rating on this report. You know, payroll's one of the biggest expenditures on your financial statements, and so we are happy to do that. I'm glad that we had that result. We've got 2 other audits for this year that were on the internal audit plan. One of those is an internal audit over the bursar's office. So we have completed our procedures as part of the audit of the bursar's office. We've got a few follow-up items that we're closing out and waiting on getting those closed out. Then we'll perform our quality control review, and then we will walk through the results of our procedures with college administration. So we have those steps left to complete before we can draft and finalize the report. But to give you an overview of what is in the scope, you see here on the screen everything from daily deposits and receipts, credit card processing, cash handling, all the way through a revenue cycle through accounts receivable and collections. And so we have, again, performed a very similar review of the internal control design in an Objective A. We've also tested effectiveness in an Objective B. And I believe in this one we also have an Objective C looking at user access through your key systems, computer systems. So we have a technology component to this as well over user access review. And so that is the scope of this audit. We anticipate that we'll finish up all our procedures and be able to report to you at the next, not the 8th coming up board meeting, but the board meeting after that. We'll have that presented, ready to present. We do also have on our plan safety and security as part of some of our audit procedures this year. This has This one is a little bit different than a straight internal audit. It is an set of advisory procedures. And so under the internal audit standards, there are two types of engagements that can be performed. One is a internal audit, which you can think of as a classical internal audit. The other is more consultative based. Given where the college is at with standing up and instituting a police department, we felt that this year it would be more productive and a better use of overall college resources, being mainly our budget and time, is to help through a consulting capacity to help look at and evaluate policies, procedures, and processes so that there's a checklist of items to address or to put in place when you have your full-time police chief and the overall in charge of the safety and security function. So this is some pre-work to help get things lined up and ready to go for when that full office can be stood up and you have a full-time chief. And so we are in the process of walking through, developing, finalizing that scope so we know exactly where we want to spend time and effort and resources. We're working hand in hand with Tammy as head of risk and other key staff for safety and security. And once we have that complete and finalize that scope and have that plan, we'll sit down, we'll have a kickoff meeting, and we'll begin our procedures. We hope to be able to complete that field work by August 31st. That's our intent and plan, but plans are often deviated. And if we are not able to do that, what we'll do is when we present to you the internal audit plan for fiscal year 2024, we'll show this as a continuance of that plan to be completed in early fiscal 2024. And so that is where we stand with the third audit, major audit as part of this year's fiscal year 2023 plan. We also have 3 follow-ups. We are in progress on all 3 of those audits. And so all of these audits were audits that were performed in fiscal year 2022. And as part of a healthy internal audit function, one of the things we do is we follow up on outstanding findings. We follow up on the remediation efforts and report that back to you. Purchasing there were 3 findings as part of that audit. We are in the process of doing that. Brandon led that audit last year and presented that to you. So Brandon is also in charge of overseeing the follow-up procedures. We have started on those here in July. We're working through the documentation that we've coordinated and are receiving, and we anticipate that we'll be able to finish that by August 31st. We are also in the middle of performing a follow-up over the findings from the information security audit. Based on preliminary discussions we've had, so just in our planning conversation, we do anticipate that all of those findings will show some sort of positive progress. And some of those will be fully remediated. At a minimum, they'll all show partial remediation is what we believe. We obviously have to do the audit work around it, but that's just our anticipation based on initial discussions. We do anticipate those. We started those in late June and are working through gathering documentation now in early July, and we anticipate that we'll be able to have those complete also by August 31st. And then as part of construction management, there were 8 findings there. Just to refresh your memory, we had one big finding that was really over standardized policies and procedures over your construction management function. And really that one finding, if we can address that, there are several other elements and other findings that we had, those remaining 7, that were all somewhat a symptom of the bigger issue of having standardized policies, procedures. So there were some issues that we found about where information was stored and some missing information. But we believe that if we can, through this follow-up, we're providing a more consultative approach to it as well. And we will be helping John Strybos update the standard operating procedures for the construction department so that we know where standardized documents are stored, their standardized processes, including places where documents are stored. So we think we can address all of those through this one set. So we'll have a partial remediation on all of those this year because we will have revised the design of the procedures, and then likely next year we'll go through and test once all those procedures can be put in place. So that is where we stand for construction management. We are in the middle of that. We've got policies and procedures revised. We think we can get those done and updated and completed by the end of this month as well.
Well, having been a former city engineer and assistant city manager in charge of construction, I'd have some interest in that area.
Yeah, there were, again, it was really around standard operating procedures. The history behind that is that Mr. Strybos was not in his position when most of those projects took place. We had a look-back period, and some of that predated him. And there was just some disarray in the way some of the files were kept and some of the evidence and documentation that we requested. So some was missing, some was unavailable, we didn't see some sign-offs and some stuff. So there was, I think even then, and Tammy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the files and the offices moved locations, and so some files were still in boxes in some places, and there was just, basically, John's getting in and trying to right the ship, and what we found, we think will help him do that, but part of that is helping him standardize some operating procedures so that people in his department know what the expectations are as part of maintaining all that documentation as the construction management function. So, and if you're interested in the report, we can happily provide you a report on. I know the college has them. You can look at the detailed report on that from last year as well. Any questions on our follow-ups for the other two audits?
I've got one. I know that we had a new hire in purchasing, not too distant past, and how cooperative has the new purchasing person been with taking care of the procedures that we needed to address in purchasing? Is that anything that you might be able to?
First of all, what hire are we talking?
I thought that we had a director of purchasing or someone new that we were looking for.
Our director,
I'm thinking back about 18 months ago.
our director remains in place. If you're talking about the chief purchasing agent,
Okay.
David Davila, he's still with.
Yes, David Davila has been with us at least for the 5 years that I've been here, probably a little bit more so.
He's been
So
here
there has
longer.
been no
That's-
transition in the leadership there.
I think I know what you're talking about. So that remains consistent. There's been no
been here,
change.
okay, all right.
And as far as I know, I don't know of any anomalies in any sort of performance or anything like that.
Yeah, so maybe you can speak to the last audit on the purchasing that we've done.
Oh, correct. And so we just met with David Davila and Kevin Murphy, who is the assistant purchasing director. And there was no one new there. So this is the same individuals we've worked with for the last many years, from the initial purchasing audit, including the new one we did last year and follow up. And we just met with them about a week and a half ago, I guess, to go talk through that item. And we'll be doing follow up here next week or so.
My mistake. I at some point I thought a discussion we were going to go out on a purchasing start. So you decided to promote from within. Is that what happened?
No, David's been, so this is the second purchasing audit we've done in our tenure here, and David's been the director both times.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there hasn't been any transition that I can think of, but there were, in our last audit finding, there were some issues. They have been addressed, and apparently we still have a few more items to address still. When I think about the operating activity and the risk associated with that area, it's very high volume, very volatile, and it changes, and so we may have some strong procedures, but the volume sometimes gets ahead of us, that we may encounter one or a few anomalies, and I think they've been identified by our auditors, but we'll continue to improve in our operating procedures to minimize the risks.
Okay. All right. My mistake.
On purchasing and information security, those are going to be completed by August. Do you anticipate reporting those to the board as well in September?
Yes,
Okay.
that's
So,
our anticipation, our goal, yes.
so we'll have a long meeting. Anything that y'all can get us in advance would be really helpful on that. And that way, board, we could keep the presentation part maybe a little bit shorter. If we have the reports in advance, would be great.
Sure, and I would anticipate that, we discuss information security in closed session just because of the nature
Gotcha.
of.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that enough time between that and the second Tuesday of September to get it in the September meeting? Do we, sometimes.
Whenever you calendar it, if it's a lot of information, just could you make sure
We will shoot for September,
Okay, yeah.
That's a good point, I forgot about the
Yeah,
timing in
but
advance prep.
we-
So-
Given our issues with budget and so on, we may have some pretty full
Agendas.
agendas in August and September.
Well, and
Let's hope not.
we can, to your point, we can table that until like an October meeting. We do also, or we will also have, after August 31st, we do have an annual internal audit report. I'll remind you that that's a requirement of the Texas Internal Audit Act that we prepare an annual internal audit report. We usually send that to the state auditor's office on your behalf, and that is usually due the first November. Yeah, November 1. We're still waiting on guidelines for that. The state auditor's office puts out new guidelines every year, and that usually happens the first full week of August as they come out sometime there. So we don't have those guidelines yet, but we will also have that to present. So we could potentially table those till October, and we can coordinate that through Tammy to make sure that we.
But to answer the question, we're going to get it to you ahead of time.
Yes.
The only thing we don't do ahead of time, like if it's in the board packet, would be something that we do have to review in closed session.
Correct.
So, yeah, so IT security, or when we do the advisory on safety and security, those would not be included in any type of public packet. But I was going to suggest that we do move any further reports into the October, because they will be here in October. That's on our calendar. Every October, they come and do our annual. So we'll try to put all of that into the October meeting.
Because what I'm hearing is there's nothing of urgent nature that the board needs to know. It's all moving along, progressing well. So there's no urgency about
Correct.
the presentation. Great. I
Yes.
just wanted to ask a question for calendaring purposes.
Yes. So with that is all the presentation we had planned. If you have other questions, we're happy to answer those. But that is the full status of all the audits that were planned and follow-up procedures for fiscal year 2023, with the update and anticipation of when we'll have those. And again, we'll work on which meeting we present all the rest of the reports at, as well as our annual report. And the plan for fiscal year 2024 will be part of that annual report. So all of that will be the next time we present to you.
Great.
Appreciate your work. I think I'm pleased with the progress you've made on the construction side, the issues related to construction. I didn't think you'd have written procedures already this quick. So again, I see that there's progress being made, and I'm encouraged.
Well, and to that point, John already had several procedures. They were dated, though, and so we're working on updating and providing some more details. So we can't take full credit for that, but unless you just want to give it to us. So.
Well, no, I remember that there was something written up, but it was not in a manner that you could actually follow or utilize. Okay. Any other questions or comments? It's the only presentation we have, right, Tammy? Or is there something else that you wanted? All right. If there's nothing else from the committee members, then we're adjourned. Thank you.